was way back in the 4th century, going to get your history lesson this morning, there was a guy named Augustine. And they changed the pronunciation of his name for Florida. It's St. Augustine. Because I guess it sounds better than Augustine. But in seminary, we all called him Augustine. And he was having a little bit of a problem. You see, Augustine, Augie, as his friends probably knew him, was driven by his sexual passion. He described himself as a slave to his desires, and even lived out of wedlock with a prostitute with whom he had had a son. Ooh. Augustine can't even get into any of the churches around here these days, right? Only his doctrines do, and we will discuss that in a minute. Because I believe Augustine's obsession with taming his own sexual desire colored his theology so much that they snuck into those doctrines that have now become that bedrock of the Christian church. The main one that he gets credit for is, seminary students, original sin. Absolutely. Which posits that we are all born with some indelible stain on our soul, and that mark is so awful that the only way God could even stand to look at us is through a blood sacrifice of his Son to atone for all of our sins. There is, however, good news that I want to share with you this morning, because there is an older doctrine that theologian Matthew Fox calls original blessing. Our goodness. And it traces its roots back to the 9th century BC. So you got Augustine in the 4th century, but you have this idea of original blessing hanging out about 9th century BC, before that Jesus guy even walked on the earth. And this originated with the original biblical authors, the psalmists, the wisdom writers, all the way through Jesus and Meister Eckhart, many modern writers and thinkers. Instead of being originally cursed, we are originally blessed. We are called good, as is all creation. And we don't need a blood sacrifice to deliver us from sin. Fox says the blessing itself is deliverance, because, he writes, it builds trust and pride and hope, and these are absolutely essential ingredients by which people can deliver themselves and thus be responsible instruments of a blessing and saving God. So as we explore this Oh, the Humanity theme this quarter, I want this to be our touchstone. This is our North Star, the fact that we are all, did I say all? All. Originally blessed. Let's say it together then. I am originally blessed. I am originally blessed. And when we can accept this, the whole world changes. We're no longer beholden to a vengeful God, but we are co-creators with a loving God. We're no longer divided by sinful nature, but we are brought together in the unity of that blessing. This is not a theology of a power over, but a blessing of fertility and the constant creation and birth of love into the world that makes everybody say, oh yeah. Now, I don't know about you, or I don't know if you know this, but God's ratings are not looking really good these days. There was a recent Gallup poll that came out that shows 81% of Americans believe in God. And now, while that may sound like a high number, it actually represents the lowest percentage of a belief in God since Gallup started asking the question way back in 1944. Back then, 98% of Americans said they believed in God. 98%. But the Almighty's numbers began to slip right around 2011, when 92% acknowledged their belief, and again in 2013 when it slipped to 87%. Now, God's slipping poll numbers coincided with a rise in the number of Americans who said they didn't believe anything in particular or called themselves agnostic or even atheist. Currently, 29% of Americans fall into what is called the none category. So when people speak about the nuns, they're not talking about Catholic people are having a flashback. Mara's like, oh my God, nuns. But they're actually talking about, right, coming with a ruler. They're actually talking about the people who fall into the nun category, N-O-N-E, not N-U-N, just to be clear. But on its face, this might appear to be bad news, right, for churches or communities that teach about believing in God. But I think that it offers some good news, especially for communities like Jubilee Circle. The evidence is in the question itself, which seems simple, but it's actually quite complex. The survey simply asks, do you believe in God? Now, back in 1944, that was a pretty straightforward question, since everyone seemed to agree on the characteristics of the God in question. Today, people are just not so sure. What do you mean when you say God? In fact, the folks back in 44, the God that the folks back then believed in may not even exist anymore in the mind of modern people. Not so much because God has changed, but our perception of God certainly has evolved over time, and maybe in some good and some bad ways. Back in 2007, Barna, which is a Christian-based research company, did a survey. This was a really revealing survey back in 2007. It was revolutionary. But they surveyed Americans aged 16 to 29, and they found that 91% of young non-Christians and 80% of young churchgoers described the church as homophobic, and that its members had become, wait for it, too political, putting its bigotry and thirst for secular power ahead of its stated principles of love. Now, some 15 years later, you can bet your money that many of those that Barna surveyed way back then are among the nuns that Gallup has discovered. That's because instead of heeding the voice of its young people, the Christian church, especially, doubled down on its homophobia. It doubled down on its political ambitions. In short, the belief in God is taking a nosedive because those who say they represent the Almighty have made the guy so unappealing that people are fleeing churches in droves. That does not mean, though, that any of these people who no longer believe in the God of evangelical Christianity don't believe in something. Many of them still believe in some manner of a higher power. Many of them still have spiritual practices, and many of them want a community with others who feel the same way. What's changed, in my opinion, is the willingness, finally the little willingness of humanity to stop believing in a God of separation. And I believe those who say they no longer believe in God are simply acknowledging that they are tired of feeling separate, and they are seeking that God of love, that real, true God that only seeks our unity. I also believe that many of them haven't found what they're looking for yet, which is why Jubilee Circle and communities like us are vital. I believe that we are here to serve those who are fleeing divisive religion, especially as Christian nationalism takes hold in so many sanctuaries and denominations. The God that these Christian nationalists offer just pushes us further apart. It is a religion of division. The God we offer is the one of love with a capital L. It is the love that encompasses all of us and teaches us that we are all the same, we are all one. And if we can transcend the ego together, we can do away with all of the little gods of fear and separation. I believe these people who no longer believe in the vengeful ego-created God of separation and the earthly power that God drives you to get are those who still believe in the basic goodness of humanity. What Matthew Fox calls our original blessing. And it's a foreign phrase to our modern ears because we've been raised since Augustine put this whole stupid doctrine together that we are born in original sin. But it wasn't just Augustine. Martin Luther agreed. He agreed on the base nature of humanity. He called us stinking bags of worms. Good morning, all you stinking bags of worms. Good to see you. Right. That's why God had to send his son as this blood sacrifice so God could look at us without losing his lunch. But just as Bugs Bunny got lost because he didn't take that left at Albuquerque, and that reference does not date me one bit, I believe that this is the moment that the Christian church lost its way. The proof is here centuries later as people start to reject this God of division. Instead, I believe many of them are seeking the God of unity. They're seeking the real God of peace and unity and love and joy. They want a way back to remembering who they are, their original blessing. And Fox believes we can counter these forces of fear and pessimism by each remembering our original goodness, which he says is represented in all of creation. This goodness, he writes, is inherent in the beauty, wisdom, and wonder of creation. Goodness and creation go together, as do goodness and God. When creation becomes the starting point of spirituality again, he says, then hope will return. Also, we will see everything differently, including divinity itself. Divinity itself won't be something out there, it's something in here. This blessing awareness will motivate us to hopeful and generous actions. It is the basis of an entirely new world. When we look at creation jubilance, we see the beauty of our interdependence upon one another. No one tree seeks to outgrow the other. No one species of flower seeks to annihilate another. No single grain of sand seeks to become the single most important grain of sand ever seen. Everything in creation, it works together. And it works together for the good of all creation. I believe this is what people yearn for in this moment. I know I do. I know I do. I just want the world to remember that sense of unifying interdependence. It's not Independence Day, my friends. It's Interdependence Day. When we remember that we are all in this together. Each one you see, you place within the holy circle of atonement or leave outside. Our reading from A Course in Miracles says this morning, judging them fit for crucifixion or for redemption. If you bring them into the circle of purity, you will rest there with them. If you leave them without, you join them there. In short, we're all in this together. We come to know this simple truth when we recognize that we are originally blessed, or as A Course puts it, refuse to accept anyone as without the blessing of atonement and bring them into it by blessing them. Holiness must be shared, for therein lies everything that makes it holy. But this is the point where the ego starts to complain. It reminds us just how deeply recalcitrant so many people are in this world. And it has tons, I mean tons of examples. Politicians, power-hungry leaders, crappy bosses, ex-friends and lovers, the crazy psychopath we read about in the news, the one we work with, 5 of the justices on some Supreme Court. So many recalcitrant people running around in the world. Surely they are not originally blessed. How can they be? No way. Yes, but they are. Everyone is originally blessed. Everyone has the blessing of atonement. Our call is to stop seeing proof of recalcitrance, which is easy to see, and look deeper. And see the proof of holy innocence within everyone. Because it's there. Those we brand as bad or mean or terrible or evil are simply those who are so lost in their world of ego that they can't see the good in anyone, much less themselves. They have buried their light of innocence and love with a mound of egoic muck that keeps them believing that the meaning of life is to gain as much power and wealth and influence over others as possible. And they use everything at their disposal, including the machinations of government and religion. They weaponize the doctrines and dogmas of religion to the point of welcoming some while condemning others. Separation is the weapon of choice for the ego, and if it can make us hate just one person, if it can make us hate just one person, and even if that person is just you, it wins. Its job is done. Oh, but Pastor, we have tried that path of love. We've tried to love people, but they're so recalcitrant. Don't take our love. Have we really tried? How can we even approach the path of love if we are unwilling to see even one person as beyond the reach of it? Our society is so tainted by this idea of original sin that we willingly put some people outside the holy circle of love because we believe them to be hopeless. That person can never change. They are beyond redemption. Are there people doing bad things in the world? Yes, of course. But it doesn't mean they're inherently evil. It means that they are deeply unconscious. And they have almost forgotten their original blessing. Buddhist monk Pema Chodron reassures us, when more of us learn to trust our basic goodness, society will get stronger. That doesn't mean there won't be hard times. It doesn't mean violence, injustice, and poverty will end, she says. It doesn't mean the polar ice caps won't melt and the water in the oceans won't rise, but it does mean that there will be a lot of resilient people who will never give up on humanity and will always be around to help others. It doesn't mean that when things get rough, it does mean that when things get rough, it will bring out the best in people rather than the worst. If we learn Jubilants, if we learn not to lose heart, we will always find ways to make important contributions to our world. Jubilants, are you willing? Are you willing this morning to believe in the God, the universe, the ultimate awareness, the flying spaghetti monster, whatever you call this, all that isness? Are you willing to believe that we are called to bring out our best to the world and not lose heart despite the ego's insistence and pile of evidence of an evil and cruel world? Are you willing to believe, Jubilants, that we are all in this together? That this is our Interdependence Day? Given the state of the world, I know it can be difficult to see original blessing in everybody you meet. Spend 5 minutes on Facebook or Twitter. Yeah, you're going to meet some deeply unconscious people, and you will be tempted to judge them and put them outside of the holy circle of love. Everybody but this person, that group. But what if you found a way to see them more deeply, to understand that we all have far more in common than maybe we would like to believe? Pema Chodron offers an exercise that you can take out with you into the world, and it's called Just Like Me. It's a way to see our common humanity, our original blessing. She says, whenever you find yourself out in the world or social media, focus on one person and say to yourself, just like me, this person does not want to feel uncomfortable. Just like me, this person loses it sometimes. Just like me, this person doesn't want to be disliked. Just like me, this person wants to have friends and intimacy. This is an exercise that can help us touch our sense of compassion for everyone, even the most recalcitrant among us. Chodron reminds us that those who believe in violence This is something to keep in mind when you're like, that person is stoking violence. Chodron reminds us, those who believe in violence are desperate to get some kind of ground under their feet. They're desperate to get away from their unpleasant feelings. They're desperate to be the one who's right. Just like me. Just like me. We all want that feeling of security. Don't want to feel our unpleasant feelings. We want to be right. What would we do if we felt so desperate? What have we done in the past to get away from unpleasant feelings, to feel right, to find some sort of solid ground in this ever-shifting universe? Maybe some things we ain't proud of. We have far more in common with those we condemn or judge than we want to believe. The truth is, Jubilants, we are all just trying to figure out this weird and wonderful world that we've just been dropped into. The good news, though, is that we can create the beautiful and unified world we want if we can see the inherent goodness of all creation, including within those we like to dismiss as wrong, evil, bad, obstreperous. If we're willing to see everyone as holy, as worthy of the God of love that created them, then we will begin to notice a flicker, maybe even just a spark of holy light in what we perceive as the darkest of souls. Holiness must be shared, the Course tells us, for therein lies everything that makes it holy. If it's true that holiness is shared, then it is impossible for us to put anyone outside the circle of God's love. I am among those who don't believe in the old-fashioned God of division anymore. If Gallup had asked me that question, I would have wanted some more clarification. What God are we talking about? Because there's one God I believe in, and there are lots of little gods out here I can't believe in. The God I know is one of unity. The God I know is of peace. The God I know is of joy and all-encompassing love. The God I know is a God of interdependence, not independence. And I, in good conscience, cannot put anyone outside of the holy circle of God's love and compassion, because I know we all have the mark of original blessing that calls us into the circle and assures us that we belong to one another. A Course offers us the invitation this morning, Jubilants, a reminder that we are all in this together. Come gladly to the holy circle and look out in peace on all who you think they are outside. Cast no one out, for this is what they seek along with you. Come, let us join them in the holy place of peace, which is for all of us, united as one in the cause of peace. This is our invitation to unity, Jubilants. Happy Interdependence Day. Oh, yeah.